For many years, the icy dark seas of the North Atlantic have hidden precious relics of World War II. Among them are the corroded and distorted remains of Nazi Germany's feared U-boat fleet, silent reminders of a conflict that extended beyond the battlefields to the depths of the ocean. In a recent discovery, a salvage team working in the waters off Norway has uncovered one of the most impressive underwater remains in naval history, a sunken Nazi submarine, thought to have disappeared in the final years of the war. The discovery alone would be headline-grabbing, but what the divers found inside the corroded hull left even the most seasoned underwater archaeologists completely stunned. Before we get started, be sure to like and subscribe for more updates. The submarine, which was lying more than 900 feet underwater, was initially detected by sonar images during a routine sweep. Boat conning tower. When the remotely operated vehicles, ROVs, sent back the first images, excitement filled the team. The submarine was largely intact, an unusual condition for a wreck of that age and depth, but no one could have predicted what lay inside. After obtaining permission to conduct a manned dive, the operation quickly evolved from a routine exploration into a full-scale international effort. Descending into the freezing pitch-black waters in a reinforced submersible, the divers approached the wreck cautiously. A layer of silt and marine life covered much of the hull, but the Iron Cross insignia was still faintly visible, a chilling reminder of their origins. Accessing the submarine's interior was a challenge. The pressure at that depth, combined with the corroded structure, made any entry extremely risky. But after carefully removing part of a collapsed hatch, the divers were able to enter. What they found was a surreal and disturbing scene. A sealed time capsule from the last, desperate days of the war. Inside the control room, dials, gauges, and levers were still attached to the walls, covered in a thin layer of rust. The atmosphere was eerie and claustrophobic, with the walls closing in around them and every creak of the submersible echoing like phantom footsteps. And among the expected artifacts of war, torpedo racks, nautical charts, personal effects, there was something no one could have imagined. In the officers' quarters, hidden behind a false panel in the wall, the divers found a metal case. It was hermetically sealed, surprisingly well preserved, and embedded in the compartment as if it had been intentionally hidden. With extreme care, the team extracted it and brought it to the surface for analysis. What was found inside redefined the entire mission. The briefcase contained meticulously written documents, many bearing the Nazi Eagle insignia and signatures of high-ranking Nazi officials. But these were no mere war logs or mission reports. These were blueprints and schematics for technologies that, according to current knowledge, should not have existed in the 1940s. Among the drawings were prototypes of advanced propulsion systems, energy weapons, and aerial vehicles completely unlike anything known at the time. These were not the crude musings of a desperate regime. The level of detail and engineering indicated that they were part of a serious and secret research initiative. Also included were rolls of photographic film, miraculously preserved thanks to the airtight container. Once released, the images showed test sites, experimental aircraft, and underground facilities. There were even photographs of unknown aircraft that looked remarkably like modern stealth drones, decades in advance. The implications were staggering. If these designs were more than theoretical, Nazi Germany came dangerously close to technological advances far beyond what the Allies had ever imagined. But the most surprising element was yet to come. In the rear of the submarine, where a storage compartment was thought to be, divers found a large cylindrical object. It was bolted to the floor and partially protected by a damaged retaining wall. The object bore no identifiable markings or serial numbers, just a smooth metal surface, nearly impervious to corrosion. Its purpose was unknown, but its presence raised immediate concerns. Experts speculated that it could be a prototype power source, a weapon, or a component of a propulsion system linked to the documents found in the officers' quarters. Its construction did not resemble anything known in Nazi technology of the time. Some members of the rescue team even questioned whether it was actually terrestrial in origin. While such claims are largely speculative, the object's composition, a combination of metal alloys that were unusual in the 1940s, only deepened the mystery. As news of the discovery spread, interest grew among scientific and military communities around the world. Historians began re-examining old intelligence reports and dossiers for references to secret Nazi projects that matched the materials recovered from the submarine. Some have pointed to Operation Paperclip, in which Nazi scientists were recruited by the United States after the war, as a possible connection. Could this submarine have been part of a larger attempt to smuggle knowledge and prototypes out of Germany during the collapse of the Third Reich? The location of the wreck added another layer of mystery. It was far from typical U-boat patrol routes, in an area where Allied forces had little presence during the war. Its isolation suggested a mission far removed from direct combat, perhaps an evacuation, a delivery, or the hiding of materials that were never meant to be found. The submarine's logs, though badly degraded, indicated a route that avoided known Allied surveillance zones. It seemed that the vessel had gone to extraordinary lengths to remain undetected. There was no sign of combat damage to the hull, nor any evidence of catastrophic internal failure. The submarine appeared to have simply shut down and settled gently on the ocean floor. This suggested a controlled descent, perhaps part of a self-destruct operation, or worse, a planned disappearance. The presence of such advanced and highly classified materials on board reinforced the theory that the mission was to prevent such secrets from falling into enemy hands, even if it meant dooming the crew. In the crew quarters, divers found the skeletal remains of several men. Their bodies were almost completely decomposed, but their positions and the objects around them painted a tragic picture. Personal items such as photographs, letters, and even diaries were discovered in waterproof containers. These objects offered a poignant glimpse into the lives of these men, some of whom may have believed they were on a final mission that could change the course of history. One of the diaries, surprisingly well preserved, contained entries that hinted at growing doubts among the crew. The author, probably a junior officer, expressed confusion about the true purpose of the journey. He described tension among commanders, long periods of silence, and the constant fear of betrayal or interception. In one entry, he mentioned being told about a cargo that could change the future. Another reported a final order to remain submerged indefinitely, should circumstances require it. What had initially seemed like a simple war loss now revealed something far more sinister and enigmatic. The submarine was not just a war machine. It was a messenger of secrets, a steel casket containing technologies and knowledge that could have rewritten the outcome of the war, and perhaps the course of the 20th century itself. The implications of this discovery go beyond historical curiosity. If the documents and devices found are authentic and functional, they represent a scientific leap forward conceived under one of the darkest regimes in modern history. Its existence forces a reassessment not only of what Nazi Germany was capable of, but also of how much of that potential was buried, literally or metaphorically, at the end of the war. Scholars of weapons technology have long speculated about the so-called Wunderwaffe, or wonder weapons, that Adolf Hitler promised would turn the tide of the war. While most of these have been dismissed as propaganda or gross exaggeration, the contents of the submarine challenge that assumption. It now seems clear that, far from being mere pipe dreams, the Nazi leadership invested heavily in cutting-edge experiments, much of it kept far from the traditional front lines and even from the highest echelons of military command. This raises disturbing questions about what might still be hidden in the oceans or in remote regions of the world. If a single submarine could hold such unprecedented secrets, what else lies underwater or buried beneath forgotten bunkers? Furthermore, how much of the technological advancement seen in the post-war decades was actually invented from scratch, and how much might have been quietly adapted from recovered Nazi research? The materials uncovered also raise troubling ethical dilemmas. Should these technologies found on board be studied and potentially developed further, even with such a shadowy origin? Or should they remain untouched, locked away as a memorial to the dangerous path science can take when tied to ideology? These are not questions with easy answers, and the rescue operation has sparked intense debate among scientific, military, and academic circles. One of the most disturbing aspects of the discovery is how advanced the designs were compared to their time. Engineers who reviewed some of the schematics were perplexed by the theoretical principles underlying the systems. One project appeared to describe a zero-point energy generator, a concept that remains largely speculative today. Another detailed a type of directed energy weapon with capabilities that, if realized, would rival the latest laser technologies. The fact that ideas like these were being explored in the 1940s suggests that the intellectual foundations of today's technological landscape may have been laid much earlier than previously believed. Even more alarming is the evidence that the submarine's mission may have been one of dispersal rather than concealment. Some interpretations of the document suggest that the sub was one of several vessels sent to the far corners of the planet, tasked with delivering components, scientists, or blueprints to sympathetic factions or safe zones. If true, this could mean that similar caches of advanced technology are still out there, waiting silently in the shadows of the deep sea, the Arctic tundra, or the South American jungles. This single discovery, a sunken steel relic, became a prism through which the final days of Nazi Germany were re-examined. It reignited long-held rumors of secret bases, hidden laboratories, and post-war escapes. While it is essential to separate myth from reality, the line between the two has become increasingly blurred in the face of such concrete and overwhelming evidence. As the rescue operation continues, the full scope of what was inside the submarine remains only partially understood. New sections of the vessel are still being explored, and more artifacts are expected to emerge. Each new find adds to the story of a mission shrouded in secrecy, driven by desperation, and charged with a potential that the modern world is only beginning to understand. What began as a deep-sea expedition has turned into one of the most provocative discoveries of the 21st century, a grim reminder that even beneath layers of water, time, and sediment, the past can still reach out and grip us with stunning force. The silent hull of the Nazi submarine has shattered that silence in the most extraordinary way, reshaping our understanding of history and suggesting that the full truth about World War II may still lie hidden in the cold, unlit corners of the world. The discovery of the Nazi submarine and its contents triggered a wave of intense investigation, not only from the scientific and intelligence communities, but also from those who had spent their lives studying the dark aspects of World War II. Once the cylindrical object, the preserved documents, and the anomalous blueprints were confirmed as authentic, an invisible thread began pulling researchers deeper and deeper into a maze of wartime secrets. This was not simply about recovering technology, it was an awakening to how incomplete our understanding of the Nazi war effort was, especially when it came to covert science and experimental strategy. Shortly after the discovery was released in classified circles, several agencies around the world reactivated dormant files relating to unsolved post-war anomalies. One of the first revelations to emerge was the peculiar pattern of submarines that went missing in the final months of the conflict. Vessels that set off from European shores and vanished without a trace. For decades, these disappearances were attributed to combat losses or shipping accidents. Now, with the wreckage serving as evidence that some missions were of a much more classified nature, these events were reclassified as possible strategic extractions of sensitive material or personnel. What reinforced this theory were the records and markings found on the submarine's mechanical systems. The manufacturing stamps did not fully match the known production lines of the Nazi Navy shipyards. Indeed, several components appeared to have originated in completely unknown facilities, possibly located in the Reich's vast underground bunker system. The implication is striking. Not only were their technological advances far ahead of their time, but they were being built far from the eyes of the conventional military establishment, probably by a specialized division of scientists and engineers operating in complete autonomy. One of the most disturbing aspects was the discovery that the submarine's internal architecture had been modified. Salvage experts noted that certain compartments had traces of lead shielding, far beyond what is required for standard naval operations. Radiation tests confirmed residual anomalies in these areas, further suggesting that the vessel was either carrying radioactive material or was part of a test platform for experimental power sources. This discovery, while deeply alarming, connected directly to passages in the recovered documents that mentioned the V7 element and delta field converters, terms never found in Allied archives, but clearly of great importance to the submarine's designers. As historians pored over the pages of technical language and hand-drawn schematics, a recurring motif emerged again and again: diagrams of circular platforms, levitation fields, and propulsion symbols that bore no resemblance to anything in conventional aeronautics. These were no mere fanciful scribbles. The schematics were labeled with calculations, material compositions, and coded notes. Linguistic experts determined that the language used was a mix of standard German and an internal lexicon, as if the scientists had developed a vocabulary of their own for technology unparalleled in contemporary science. The broader implications of these materials went beyond curiosity. In particular, a sealed envelope found in the officer's safe contained a report addressed to a high-ranking Reich official. The report summarized findings from an isolated test site in the Harz Mountains, a facility now known to have been wiped off the map by heavy bombing. However, the report made no mention of loss or destruction. It stated that tests of anti-gravity lift engines had been carried out successfully, with no anomalous casualties, and described trials that reached altitudes of several thousand meters. No existing record in the Allied archives mentions such tests, nor has any physical trace of such technology been found to date. Interestingly, much of what was uncovered aligns disturbingly with declassified fragments of the post-war interrogations of captured Nazi scientists. Some of these accounts, long considered delusions or propaganda, suggested the existence of a secret faction within the SS dedicated to exploring extreme physics, dimensions beyond our known limits, time displacement, and non-traditional energy systems. The recovered materials support the idea that these scientists did not work alone or in the dark. They had resources, infrastructure, and missions specifically designed to protect, and eventually relocate, their discoveries. As the implications spread through confidential circles, questions about the identity of the submarine's crew grew louder. Forensic reconstruction of the remains indicated that many were not ordinary sailors. Bone density analysis and the presence of dental work that did not meet military standards suggested a higher standard of living, one that was consistent with individuals of high social status or scientific training. This further supported the hypothesis that the crew was not composed solely of military personnel, but included researchers or technicians responsible for overseeing the transportation or preservation of key technologies. Further reinforcing this theory was the peculiar discovery of sealed vials and a compact refrigeration unit, still partially functional, protected inside a special chamber deep within the hull. Inside were preserved organic materials, tissue samples, bacterial cultures, and strange crystalline structures held in suspension. Geneticists and biologists called in to examine the materials were astounded. While some of the biological matter appeared to be of human origin, others were completely unidentifiable. The crystalline substances exhibited electrochemical properties not seen in any known mineral or synthetic compound. Their intended purpose remains speculative. Were they part of medical experiments? Were they early attempts at biological enhancement? Or perhaps components of propulsion systems? Some experts believe they were part of a program to create a new type of crew, individuals capable of withstanding extreme gravitational forces or radiation, genetically adapted to survive in environments where ordinary soldiers could not. It may sound like science fiction, but the contents of that submarine hinted at ambitions that bordered on the transhuman. Also recovered from a lower cargo hold were boxes lined with protective foam and stamped with esoteric symbols that did not correspond to any German or Allied military code. When opened, they revealed cylindrical tubes containing metal rods, some of which bore unknown micro-patterns. Materials testing revealed that these rods were composed of tungsten alloys mixed with rare earth elements and traces of something anomalous, possibly synthetic or isotopic. No known wartime application explained their presence. Their design resembled control rods or capacitors, but on a scale that suggested a much more energy-intensive use than the nuclear reactors of the time. If they were part of a functioning system, an engine, a gun, or a generator, they would have produced a power output far superior to anything used by any nation during the war. Analysts dubbed them Vanguard units, a term taken from one of the few legible labels found on the box. The implications are not just technological. There is now serious debate in confidential scientific circles about the philosophical intent behind these discoveries. What exactly were the Nazis preparing for? Were they building an ark to preserve a future generation of knowledge? A desperate lifeboat to carry their legacy beyond the end of the war? Or was this part of a larger plan? A quiet colonization effort? A seed vault of innovation dropped into remote territories, hidden away until the time was right for it to re-emerge? Strategically, the idea of dispersing technological hubs around the world opens up a new interpretation for the final strategies of the Third Reich. Perhaps they never expected to win in the traditional way. Perhaps the real victory, in their minds, was the survival of their ideas, their sciences, their vision of power, redefined not by borders, but by control of what would come next in science and civilization. This brings us to an even more disturbing realization. If the knowledge contained in this submerged vessel has survived intact for nearly 80 years, what's to say there aren't other similar deposits? Every great ocean trench, every deep glacial valley, Every dense jungle could hide remnants of the same program. The question isn't whether they exist. It's who might find them next. The discovery has also raised ethical alarms in the military and defense sectors. If an opposing power were to encounter a similar craft, or worse, understand and replicate its technology, the strategic balance of the modern world could change overnight. Propulsion designs alone, if retrofitted with modern materials and computing capabilities, could yield aerial platforms beyond anything currently in operation. Surveillance-resistant, invisible to radar, and capable of vertical takeoff without traditional fuel sources, such systems could render modern air defense obsolete. Efforts are already underway to reverse engineer some of the simpler artifacts recovered, but the process is arduous. The original creators of these systems are long dead, and the language of the documentation is archaic and incomplete. Even so, limited advances could change everything from energy distribution to military logistics to long-distance transportation. Beyond the immediate scientific and military consequences, the discovery began to reshape the cultural narrative about war. For decades, the end of World War II was portrayed as the moment when the world turned the page on a dark age. But what if that page was never really turned, just folded and hidden? What if the war's true legacy lies not on the battlefields, but in the technological seeds it quietly planted, waiting for the right moment to germinate? The psychological weight of this realization cannot be underestimated. The sinking serves as a terrifying time capsule, not of a national failure, but of its intentions. There is a profound difference between losing a war and retreating from it in the hope of sowing seeds of future influence. The fact that the submarine carried not just artifacts but aspirations for a future few were ever likely to know about casts a long shadow over what we think we know about the 20th century. Some researchers have even correlated sightings of unidentified aerial phenomena in the decades following the war with locations near supposed Nazi research centers. If these craft are neither entirely modern nor of extraterrestrial origin, could they be remnants or evolutions of the very technologies discovered on that sunken U-boat? Could it be that secret factions or laboratories continued this work, passed along through obscure channels, funded and protected far from the eyes of governments and the public? Perhaps the most haunting thought of all is the silence of the sinking itself. For decades it lay untouched in the icy darkness, its secrets preserved by time and pressure. It gave no signals. It did not leak. It waited silently like a message in a bottle from another timeline, a version of history that had never come to light, until now. And now that it has, the world must deal with what it has found. Discovery is not just about understanding the past. It's about confronting the idea that history is not static. It is dynamic, often hidden, and occasionally explosive when revealed. What's inside that Nazi submarine is not just evidence. It is a challenge to our notions of progress, of secrecy, and of the fine line between science and ambition. The wreck has not yet revealed all its secrets. There are sections that remain unexplored. Instruments continue to analyze the materials. Linguists are still decoding the technical language and military jargon. And in highly secure laboratories, some of the objects are being activated for the first time in nearly a century. What they reveal next could change everything we know about the modern era. The final chapter of World War II may only be beginning to be written. From the darkness of the deep sea and the cold, whispering voice of steel. While the technological revelations of the sunken Nazi submarine have dominated the headlines, another dimension of the discovery is emerging. One that involves the structure and scope of the operation that orchestrated the vessel's final mission. As experts peel back the layers of its purpose, a previously obscure web of planning, compartmentalization, and ideological focus begins to emerge. This was no isolated effort, nor a desperate act by a derelict commando unit. It was the product of a meticulous and deeply secretive apparatus within the Third Reich, so well insulated that it operated almost autonomously, separate from the traditional military command. Central to understanding this scheme is the peculiar alignment between what was found on the submarine and a handful of wartime cryptographic references to a program called Project Niflheim. Until now, little was known about this codename. It appeared only in fragments of captured intelligence reports, usually mentioning remote installations in the Bavarian Alps or the Sudetenland, and always in contexts that confused Allied analysts. However, markings on some of the metal containers inside the submarine including a serial code corresponding to NIF 013AV, provided the first physical link between this elusive initiative and actual materials. What distinguishes Project Niflheim from other Nazi scientific endeavors is its stated goal, hinted at by translated directives, to create vehicles and instruments to resist defeat. This phrase, abstract as it may seem, makes clear that the submarine's journey was not simply one of escape, it was one of preservation, carrying the seeds of a long-term scientific strategy that outlived the Reich itself. This was an ideological war, not in the traditional sense, but in the continuity of ideas and tools that could resurface decades later, under new banners or in an entirely new geopolitical context. Equally intriguing are the clues found in the submarine's internal modifications. In addition to the reinforced lead shielding and anomalous radiation patterns, unconventional communications devices were installed in hidden compartments, including a primitive form of encrypted relay with components that predate the technology used in Cold War satellites. The presence of this system suggests that the submarine was not just a transport vessel. It was designed to maintain contact, either with a central command or with sister vessels engaged in parallel operations. Signal analysis has already begun to track unexplained bursts of data in historical sonar records in areas where similar shipwrecks are suspected. These signals may have been automatic pings from hidden U-boats that remained submerged, dormant, waiting for a return signal that never arrived. Adding to the mystery is the submarine's internal logbook, a handwritten catalog of stored materials, carefully kept in a leather-bound journal. Unlike traditional naval logbooks, this log was coded, referring to each item by symbol rather than name. Only after weeks of cryptographic work were the researchers able to decipher parts of the system. Each object, from unidentified metal alloys to crystalline biological samples, was listed with a specific directive for return. Whether this return referred to a geographic relocation, an ideological resurgence, or even the re-emergence of some central scientific truth, no one knows for sure. But the choice of words is deliberate and chilling. Inserted into that same journal was a thin, brittle parchment containing a diagram that bore no relation to anything else on board. It was a representation of concentric rings interconnected by lines and symbology, with a strong resemblance to ancient esoteric diagrams used in alchemical and metaphysical studies. Some analysts initially dismissed it as symbolic embellishment, but upon closer examination, connections emerged between the structure of the diagram and the mathematical proportions used in propulsion design. This revelation suggested that the Nazi scientists involved might have been fusing empirical experimentation with unorthodox theories, possibly inspired by ancient philosophies, metaphysical systems, or even early interpretations of unified field theory. Such ideological fusion was not uncommon in the more arcane sectors of the Nazi hierarchy. Sections of the SS, particularly the Ahnenerbe, an organization dedicated to unearthing the ancient knowledge of the Aryan race, were known to explore occult sciences alongside conventional history and anthropology. What was once dismissed as propaganda or pseudoscience is now being re-evaluated. Did the Nazi leadership support multiple scientific paradigms simultaneously? One aligned with conventional physics, the other with more speculative models based on arcane theories? Supporting this possibility are the uniforms recovered from two of the skeletons in the crew quarters. The insignia sewn onto the fabric differed from the standard Kriegsmarine designations. One of them featured a triangular glyph surrounded by a circular laurel, a symbol not found in any public military archive. Forensic analysis of the fabric dated it to 1944 and confirmed its authenticity. The unknown insignia suggests the existence of a specialized, perhaps compartmentalized branch of researchers or operatives dedicated exclusively to this field of knowledge. Men and women recruited not through military means, but from occult, scientific, or philosophical circles in Germany and occupied Europe. If you like this video, don't forget to like it and subscribe to the channel. Comment below and tell us, what do you think of what the divers found inside the sunken Nazi submarine? We want to hear from you. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.